Welcome to the Raptors Weekly Podcast. It's the East Preview Edition, and joining me are two stalwarts of the Raptors Weekly Podcast, Andrew Thompson and William Liu. Andrew, you just woke up?
You could say I've woken up. I will be on the podcast. Hopefully I will wake up at some point during the middle of it.
Will, you've been awake since 6 a.m.
That's right. That's how I roll these days. 6 a.m. on a Saturday. Only to find out there's no prem.
It's an international weekend, so there's no prem whatsoever. I guess we got to dedicate a podcast at some point to your trip to some Chinese country you went to for a couple of months.
We've already done that.
Oh, you already done that? Okay. So we don't. Do you want to recap in a couple of sentences what that was all about?
It was a lot of culture shock, but less culture shock than I thought. Someone who grew up here, mostly in Canada.
Okay.
Yeah.
Juicy details, which Will has left out, and we'll get back to this at a future date. But today is all about the Eastern Conference preview. We've held these I think 3 years or 2 years in a row now, and we have been pretty much not dead accurate, but we've been in the ballpark, I'd say. So maybe listener, pay some attention to what you hear today, because some of these standings we're going to talk about might actually come to fruition. And usually the way we do this is we start at the bottom of the East and go all the way up. Does that sound like a plan, gentlemen, today?
Sounds great. We should always open podcasts with talking about the Nets and the Sixers.
Well, I guess we should talk about some Raptor news if you want, Will, because the Raptors did sign Masai Ujiri to an extension. Your thoughts on that one?
It's a great move. I mean, from all the reports that you were sort of scatteredly hearing about the Raptors organization, it seemed like a lot of their top executives were in really high demand across the league. So the fact that they were able to retain them and also keep the management structure the same way with the three core players there, Masai, Weltman, and Webster, who's sort of a rising star in the organization, the fact that they were able to keep them all for the long term is great.
He's like the Norman Powell of the executive staff. Andrew, any objections to Masai Ujiri being extended?
No, absolutely not. He's been fantastic. As long as there's a chance we can trade with New York again, we got to keep this rolling.
Well, we'll get to New York a little bit later. Not too later as we go bottom up, but we'll get there. So let's start at the bottom. I guess at the bottom is by consensus right now are the Brooklyn Nets coming in at 30th in the East. I had them with 17 wins. The Atlantic Division might have gotten stronger, Andrew, but not that much stronger because Brooklyn's still in it.
That's right. Trust the process, though. The 76ers are out of the basement. This is big news. I agree.
So what do you think of Brooklyn's Jeremy Lin, I guess, is the big factor there this year, Andrew?
Yeah, the Brook to Lin connection with Brook Lopez and Jeremy Lin is going to score points some nights, but man, they're going to be a bad defensive team. What is their long-term goal? That the way they've kept on to guys and tried to sign other dudes, but I mean, I guess they don't have any draft picks with which to build. But when they sat down and decided what they were going to do in the offseason, based on what they did, what do you think their plan was? Like, what do you think they sat down and said, here's our goal? Was it, let's just kind of try to be at least a little bit more entertaining, perhaps, even though we're not going to win games? I don't know what their broad idea to do. I guess they tried to sign a few guys to offer sheets. Like they offered
Tyler Johnson for the Heat and Alan Crabb.
The Blazers, Alan Crabb. I like Alan Crabb, but what do you guys think that their plan was?
If you look at the acquisitions they made this summer, it's hard to say. I mean, it seems like what they're doing is trying to take undervalued younger-ish players across the league and then trying to develop them into better players. So, I mean, Jeremy Lin was the crown jewel of their offseason. Trevor Booker, Gravis Vasquez, Justin Hamilton, Luis Scola, definitely a younger player who could be developed there. Joe Harris, Anthony Bennett, and Randy Foye. So, this is just... I mean, some of them, I guess you can justify as veteran presence, like Luis Scola and Randy Foye, but, I don't know. They're basically gambling that their player development staff, under the new coach Kenny Atkinson, could make something out of Joe Harris and Anthony Bennett. Which good luck to that. Yeah,
the way I look at it is that they got two problems. One, they don't have any draft picks, so they already. It's a pretty big problem and kind of constrains you in what you can do in the summer in terms of rebuilding, which is what they're trying to do. On the other hand, they have cap space, but nobody really wants to come because it's not really New York. I think when they made that team, there was this assumption that they're close to the city. It's going to be a big city atmosphere. It's not. It's Brooklyn, right? It's not the same as playing in New York. And I think that has kind of disappointed the fan base a little bit, and maybe they had higher expectations of players being attracted to Brooklyn. That's not happening. So no free agents, no draft picks. What are you going to do? To me, what they're doing is their only option, I feel, is as Andrew said, let's try to play a little more entertaining basketball. Let's get a little excitement going in Brooklyn. Let's just start from the ground up as much as we can, given the constraints we have, and let's see how it goes. There's no long-term plan here. It's basically just wait till we get some more draft picks, and maybe in the next couple of years they play a little more credible basketball and aren't a laughing stock. I think they don't have a long-term plan. They just have a short-term plan of just getting a little more respect.
Yeah, I don't know how much respect they're going to pick up this year, but no, they're so bad.
Okay. Andrew's clearly still waking up. But I think that's enough time even Brooklyn Nets fan spend on Brooklyn. So let's move on to up the ladder. And now getting out of the basement, thankfully, are the Philadelphia 76ers coming in at 14th ranked. 26 wins is what we think they're going to finish around. Will, trust the process is over. Brian Colangelo has taken over. What's next for the Sixers?
I don't know if the trust the process is over necessarily, because they just made a trade earlier this week to take on salary and to add 2 second-round picks. That's a very Sam Hinkie move there. But, I mean, I can kind of see the jump happening for Philadelphia, but I still, personally, I got them for 21 wins next season just because I don't think there's any shooting at all in that team. And it's going to be hard for them to play their big man or even develop their big man without any shooters to open the floor for them. But I mean, the talent's all there. If Joel Embiid comes back and is something close to what he offers as a promising 7-foot stretch big who can play defense, that could be a big difference maker. But then again, if that happens, then you're taking away from Okafor and Nerlens Noel. So
is there a trade coming there? Is there not a trade coming there?
There has to be. There has to be, right? There's just too many bigs. Ben Simmons is a power forward who can handle the ball. I don't know. I mean, and then in terms of the veteran guys that they added, Jared Bayless, Gerald Henderson, Sergio Rodriguez, man, that is the most Brian Colangelo offseason ever. Signing some mid-tier guards.
Let me play Will's advocate or devil's advocate. I don't know how it goes. Is that at least at this point they have NBA players on the roster beyond their rookies? I mean, we made fun of Jared Bayless, Gerald Henderson, or whatever, but at least they're somewhat legit guards in the league, which should make the team better from a basketball perspective. From a long-term perspective, I don't know. Obviously, they're not part of the long-term plans, but in the near term, I think you might see Philadelphia not be a complete pushover like they were last year. Or am I wrong?
Yeah, the last 3 years now, we've started each season asking the question: is this Sixers team do they have a chance of being the worst NBA team of all time as far as their overall record goes? So the good news is, even if we don't have them being the not worst team in the East, even if you want to disagree with that and say that you think Brooklyn's better than them, you cannot argue that this team on paper it has a good chance of being the worst team we've ever seen in the NBA. So that's neat. But it's like Will was saying, that they've got their 4 essential young players all play power forward or center. So, or 5, I guess. 5 of them, 4 of them. But they need to make some moves. Gerald Henderson and Jared Bayless are not going to move the needle for this team. This team, their games are all about figuring out what they have with their big guys and where they're going to make them fit.
Yeah, I think Brian Colangelo has a lot of assets at his disposal, and if there's one team that I watch as what they're going to do next is Philadelphia, because they got so many assets and they have a lot of potential to make moves. I think Colangelo tried to move Noels earlier in the offseason. It didn't work. I think a trade has to be coming there, and I think that trade for Noels might shape what their season is all about. But at the same time, as Andrew said, they're not the worst team of all time, which is obviously a step up in what they were in the circles they were talked about last season. So good on Sixers for moving up a little bit. Will, do you trust Colangelo to make the right moves here?
I trust Colangelo to make a lot of moves, and he has a lot of assets, and so some of those moves are going to work out. Is he going to have a clear foresight into shaping this roster that obviously doesn't make sense on paper, even though if they have good prospects, the prospects don't make sense the way Minnesota's prospects do, for example.
Pretend that you're talking to a Sixers fan and giving him some advice on what to expect for the next 2 years. What would you tell him?
I mean, some of Brian Colangelo's small trades are going to work out fantastically. He's going to find some undervalued players, and they're going to be decent. But he's also going to try to swing for the fences very quickly and very soon. I'm surprised he hasn't done it already. And you're going to hope that he's going to have a coherent thought to that, rather than trading for Jermaine O'Neal or stuff like that. Ugh.
Do you think there's any chance that they actually get a good return on their big young guys? Like, I think that's part of the thing you need to be aware of is probably the only reason they haven't had a trade up to this point is because there's not a good market for it. And between the fact that none of these young guys, like Okafor and Noel, haven't blown anyone away so far, and Embiid is a question mark, and he's also the one that is probably has the most long-term value to your own franchise if he can ever be anything. Like the Sixers are coming from a place of so little leverage and having not really put on a showcase for any of these guys that I don't foresee a world where they can get a return on trading any of their guys and still getting anything that would make the fan base say, okay, that's worth what we went through in order to get that top draft pick.
Yeah. Even if they package all their assets together, like they're not getting a superstar in there. Like this is not. They don't have assets to get. Forget Russell Westbrook. I mean, they don't have assets to get. I don't know. An aging Manu Ginobili. I don't know. I totally get your point about Nerlens Noel, man, because he's a guy that is not, like, he's a good rim protector, but he's not a modern NBA big like Cat is or whatever. So totally get Andrew's point on that. The expectations that Colangelo might have may not be met on the market.
Yeah, and it's also very hard for him to work out a trade because he doesn't want draft picks back, right? So you can only get established players and trading rookies for them, and you basically need someone to try to rebuild. Like, you could probably trade Noel for, like, Kenneth Faried, for example, and you can get a different kind of big, but like that is that something that's even moving the needle? And I think that's probably, as you described, it's pretty difficult to trade out of this position.
Let's move on. Let's go up the chain again and let's talk about Milwaukee, a team that Will had a lot of faith in a couple of years ago, and since then it has just gone downhill.
They want to beat the Raptors.
And I was reading a couple of NBA previews, and listed as their key losses is Grievous Vasquez. I don't know how key he was to the team, but Andrew, let's start with you here. Additions here are Mirza Teletovic, Deladova came in via free agency. The 45-year-old Thon Maker is there as well, and then obviously OJ Mayo, Jared Bayless, and Vasquez exited. Your thoughts on the new look Bucks, which look a lot like the way old Bucks, which sucked a lot, and there's more suckage in the near future for them, I anticipate. What do you think?
Yeah, these guys really believed in Matthew Dellavedova. Their point guard situation has been a fascinating whirlwind the last couple of years, and I don't know. I'm not really sure how this team got better unless all of their young guys take big steps forward. And I get the Greek Freak is probably poised to continue getting a lot better. Jabari Parker is going to at least be able to play, hopefully, this year. But I see them taking another step back from last year when we kind of thought they'd be all right. And they're an odd mix of super athletic and then the guys that they brought in are kind of not. Like Teletovic is, he plays kind of where I guess you want Greek Freak and a couple other guys and Jabari Parker playing for you, and he can shoot, but he's just so slow. So if you're playing him big minutes, it means you're not playing one of the young guys that you're building your team around. So I don't know. I don't think that he plays a major role for this team, I guess.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure what they're plugging in to make them better than last year.
Yeah, I mean, they had a couple of issues from way back when, which they still haven't solved, which is 3-point shooting. I mean, anytime you have MCW at the point, it's going to be an issue. Deladova is more of an on-the-ball guy. I don't think he can spot up off the ball as much as you would want him to. The guy that I think got better, but I expected more from was Chris Middleton, and I still think he's going to get better, but I don't think he's hit the heights that many people thought he might have. Will, thoughts on the Bucks?
Just none of the moves they made in the offseason necessarily moves the needle, quote unquote. I mean, Dellavedova is fine. He's not going to play on the ball as much, and it's probably not effective if you keep the ball in Dellavedova's hands. That frees up the point for Giannis to handle the ball just like he did towards the end of last season. And while that translated to a lot of success for Giannis personally, individually, it didn't necessarily translate to a lot of success for the Bucks as a whole. I still don't know what they do with Greg Monroe because he clearly doesn't fit whatsoever. They're probably going to trade him. And then what do they do at center? Like, do they play a John Henson, who is like a very, very discount version of Nerlens Noel, or do they play Thon Maker, who, as you mentioned, no one even knows anything about, but he could either be great or not great. It's just, I don't know. I see another year of more of the same with the Bucks. Unless I think the big key for them is if Jabari Parker can take the step forward, because they kind of need, what they kind of lack is like a all-consuming offensive player that everyone can play off of them. And Giannis kind of has that, but like Giannis isn't as good at putting the ball in the basket, right? And Jabari Parker, if he makes good on that Carmelo Anthony type of promise, then suddenly that team's really good because they have a lot of decent wing defenders around, Jabari to make up for his weaknesses.
I can see like some guys having big years there, like Middleton averaged 18 points last year. I can see like maybe even Deladova getting a high PPG or something, but it's just, as you said, it's not cohesive. It might come at the expense of the overall team, just because they're going to be a bad team. There's going to be a lot of freewheeling going on, and you can see guys putting up numbers, but I just don't think it's going to happen at the for the betterment of the team. It'll just be very individualistic play, and I think that's what the Bucks are. They had basically one good year and got the fan base excited, and everybody thought this was the stepping stone to something greater. And what it turned out to be is a very slippery slope. Basically, they slipped, and now they're falling fast. And I think next year, this time, we won't be talking about them being 15th or 14th rather than going up the chain.
I mean, I'm slightly higher on the Bucks than I think you are in this situation.
I just don't see who has any kind of gravity on their team on offense to make them actually do. Like, they have players who have a lot of skill, but they don't have anyone who can bend a defense, I don't think, and that's why their offense just lacks so much, like anything that looks dynamic to me, and the players that they need to play in order to try to make that happen kind of have some defensive weaknesses that when you put those two things together, I just don't see how they win more than 30 games.
Yeah. So let's leave the Bucks alone and go to the Orlando Magic, who I think we have at about 34 wins or so. Orlando Magic, things are going pretty well for them. They were doing the proper rebuilding job, and then they pulled off the big trade of Serge Ibaka and giving up Oladipo. So, Andrew, I already got Will's thoughts in a previous pod on this, but your thoughts on acquiring Ibaka, who can best be described probably as an aging rim protector, and giving up a guy like Oladipo, who was on the up and up.
I still think Ibaka is really good. I think, like he was just visibly bored and kind of unsure of what he was even supposed to do in Oklahoma City. I think he can still be a dynamic defensive player, and I think Ibaka is still very good, but Ibaka is a piece. He's not a focal point in any way, shape, or form, and he's got 1 year left in his contract. So that trade is fascinating to me because either you are extremely confident in your ability to re-sign Serge Ibaka, or they were just sort of deciding they needed to punt on the number 2 pick from 2-3 years ago that they thought that up to this point it looked like they were trying to kind of build their team around. Like Oladipo, I don't know how to draw a conclusion from that trade outside of the fact that they were just out on Oladipo. They did not think he was going to be anything close to what he'd been projected to be, and that they were ready to just, get rid of him and move on because I think Ibaka doesn't help them make the playoffs this year if that's your ultimate goal, and you have no reason to suspect that he is any more likely to sign with you than any number of other teams.
Let me correct myself. He's not aging. He's 26. He's been in the league for 7 years. Came in when he was 19, so it just seems
26?
like he's old. Well,
yeah.
He's listed as 26, whatever.
Yeah.
But my point is actually Andrew's point, is that, next summer, if you look at Ibaka, even if the Magic win like 35 games, is Orlando the place where he's going to want to stay to look for a ring that he's missing so far? I think he's like I can see Ibaka having like a Leon Poe type end of career where a lot of teams want him for rebounding and shot blocking and intangibles and so on and so forth. So he might jump to the closest contender he can find. That's why it doesn't make sense from a Magic perspective to make this move, even if you didn't believe in Oladipo so much. But Will, comment on the Magic, but also talk about, is there a logjam at center there with Biyombo as well?
Yes. Nothing of the Magic's offseason made sense, aside from re-signing Evan Fournier, who was like a fine player. So, last season, it clearly wasn't working. Scott Skiles is a poor fit for the team, as everyone expected, because he's terrible with rookies, and all they had was rookies. Scott Skiles randomly quits in the offseason. They get Frank Vogel, who's a very nice coach, but
Game 5 notwithstanding.
Well, exactly, right? Thanks to Frank Vogel for playing Ty Lawson so many minutes. But, they traded Tobias Harris, who's like a very reasonable contract. They're going to get all this cap space in the summer, and they're talking about how we might get Chandler Parsons and Al Horford, or we might chase Durant or like Durant and Horford or something like that. But basically, they had two max salary cap slots, and that's something kind of appealing. And they have the state of Florida in their favor. And then at the end of it, they get Bismack Biyombo, Jeff Green for $15 million, DJ Augustine on a 4-year, $29 million deal. And they trade a lot of their future assets for Serge Ibaka, who's 1 year away from free agency. And the team doesn't even make sense. The team lacks. What the team lacked the most was shooting and just capable offensive players. And they still don't have any more capable offensive players. Serge Ibaka is not a guy who creates shots for himself. He's not even a guy who really creates shots for other people because you're not really that afraid if you leave Ibaka open, even though he can hit the jumper. He's not a good role man. Bismack Biyombo we know about. We don't want to slander Bismack. He's everyone's dad. Jody Meeks, we don't even know if he's healthy. I don't know why they traded for him. Like, DJ Augustine is like such a average backup point guard. I don't know why you would try to sign one for 4 years. The team sucks. It's an awful team. They can't score at all.
Biyombo, Green, and DJ Augustine, like 2 years ago, you could have picked all three off the waiver wire.
Exactly.
They're that caliber. I know Biyombo had one great year, but other than that, I look at the additions here. Biyombo, Green, Jody Meeks, and Augustine. Nobody's getting excited about this. And Ibaka is somebody who will not carry a team. Like we talked about the Bucks not having a guy they can, they can play off of. Who do the Magic have?
Evan Fournier. That's it.
You look at them and you would have thought coming into the offseason that, like, okay, they need to figure out what they have in Aaron Gordon and Alfred Payton and Nikola Vukovic, and either figure out how to support those guys, or you need to at least play them as much as possible to figure out what there is in the sense of whether or not you have trade value, whether or not you have a real piece here. And instead, they brought in veterans to challenge minutes at every one of those positions without making themselves notably better. Why?
It just doesn't make any sense. I think the GM Rob Hennigan's probably on the outs. This doesn't sound like these don't read like Rob Hennigan moves at all. It reads like ownership's trying to win and they're trying to spend money on anybody who will take their money.
Sorry if I'm not paying too much attention to the Magic because up next we got the team that's talking about going undefeated, the New York Knicks, who have hinted that I think the quote from was it Noah or Rose? I think it was Rose was like. I think he meant to say that we have a chance in every game, and what it came out sounding like was that he thinks the Knicks might go undefeated. So I get what he's saying. It's just it was kind of funny. But let's start with Andrew on the Knicks. Incoming Derrick Rose, aging Derrick Rose, even more aging Joakim Noah. You got Courtney Lee, who's getting bounced around pretty much every year. Brandon Jennings and Justin Holiday. And on the out, you got Derek Williams, Aaron Aflalo, your man Langston Galloway, so the Raptors don't have to worry about that. And Robin Lopez and Jose Calderon. Andrew, the Knicks offseason, tell me what the Knicks did and what they will do.
We thought they overpaid for Robin Lopez last summer in a move that didn't make a lot of sense for where they were at. And they kind of shuffled the deck chairs on the Titanic and said, how can we essentially pay for the exact same center but give him even more money over a longer period of time with Noah? I want to believe that Noah can get back to somewhere close to when he was facilitating a lot of offense for Chicago and he was just a defensive force, but I just don't. We're looking at 2+ years now of his body just not being available for him to play in a real way, and for teams kind of having figured that out. And I root for Noah to be who he was, but I just don't see how he can get back there. Also, Carmelo has done so much to rejuvenate the brand of Carmelo this summer. Peaked for me by just going to the bodega in his house coat in the middle of the night. But has anyone lost more credibility for their brand as both a player and just a human being as much as Derrick Rose has? This is the guy who was an MVP, and we were all waiting for him to come back. And even if you didn't believe that he could come back from his knee issues, I think everyone was still rooted for him. And is anyone buying any Derrick Rose stock as an athlete or as a human being anymore?
I mean, especially now the case, the details of his sexual assault case are coming out. It's pretty horrible. Whether or not he actually did these things with the consent of the woman or not. Like, just what he did was that he's personally admitted to is not great in that scenario. So, yeah, man, Derrick Rose. And he's kind of the whole pivot over this whole thing.
What was Noah's other offer on the table other than New York? Was there one?
None. No one even talked about anything.
Not in that price range. Absolutely not.
I'm sure the Magic would have signed him, though. They needed a fifth center.
That's the part that doesn't make sense to me, is that I think the Noah signing doesn't happen if the Rose signing doesn't. You see what I'm saying? Like, he's only there to, like, basically give Derrick Rose company, just because there's some familiarity there, and the Knicks are hoping that it might revive something. I don't see it happening because I don't think they're going to be healthy to start with. And second, even if they are, I don't think they're the player that used to be. Derrick Rose is a guy that his playing style relies on being explosive and, getting into the lane and like just exploding to the rim and being twisty and like finishing with a lot of athleticism. And I don't think he's that player anymore. Yeah, his jumper got a little better, but he's still the same player that he was. He still relies on the same things that he relied on in his first 4 years in the league, and those have gone downhill. He hasn't added anything suave or anything which doesn't rely on athleticism to his game. So that's why I'm worried about Derrick Rose from a basketball perspective. And the Knicks as a whole, man, I guess the real question, Andrew, is Phil Jackson still running the triangle?
Speaking of people who've ruined their brand, like Old Man Jackson is not doing himself any favors at all. But this is, like, for a team that's so obsessed, our front office that's really obsessed with playing this brand of basketball that's supposed to be so team-oriented and has this different philosophy. I mean, you've got guys in Derrick Rose and Carmelo Anthony and Brandon Jennings who want to shoot the ball when they get the ball. And I think Carmelo deserves credit for his assist ratio getting better the last couple of years. I think Carmelo has very quietly tried to do a lot of things the team wanted to do and tried to address his own criticisms. I'm not worried about Carmelo, but I don't see how Derrick Rose and Brandon Jennings make sense in the triangle or, I mean, really at all. But like outside of Porzingis and Melo being fine but declining, I don't know what this team is.
Have the Knicks in the last 15 years actually seriously tried to rebuild? It's an honest question. Like, have they actually said, you know what, we're done, let's rebuild? Or has it always been trying to do it off the fly and do a half-ass job or not really commit to a rebuild and always kind of do it like the half-baked thing?
I mean, the closest they've come to that is when they cleared a lot of cap room before 2010 and then tried to chase free agents, but then they couldn't get LeBron, they couldn't get D-Wade, and then they got Amar Stoudemire. So, like, yeah, they tried. They tried to clear the cap room a little bit, but that's as close as it comes to rebuilding for them. I got another sad question for you guys. Derrick Rose is the best point guard in New York since?
Skinny Raymond Felton.
Raymond Felton, yeah, that's what I was going to go. Chris Duhon?
That's what I mean. Like, the Knicks, like, New York is thought of as this, like, capital for, like, point guards. Amazing point guards coming to New York. All got great handles, can't really shoot, but whatever. And, like, all they had to show for it last year was, like, Jose Calderon, Langston Galloway, who was, like, nothing to write home about, except when he plays the Raptors.
Oh, by the way, Jeremy Lin, dude. I forgot Jeremy Lin.
I mean, probably, yeah. Probably Jeremy Lin is the best point guard they've seen in, like, oh, man.
Since Chris Childs? And that's saying something?
Yeah, like Stephon Marbury.
Charlie Ward?
Yeah.
We're going way back now.
Allen Houston, baby.
He wasn't point guard. He was shooting guard.
Yeah. Starks.
Starks was Andrew. How would you describe Starks? You're a little older than Will. What do you think?
He played combo guard, but he played closer to what you would call a shooting guard. Style. He was a shooter, and that was his role on the team. Yeah. But
he was the Tony Allen of his time, I'd say. Good defender, good shooter, a little bit of ball handling. Something like that.
He's a lot better shooter than Tony Allen.
He had that left-handed throwdown against the Bulls, just to remember.
That's right, yeah.
Let's move on from the Knicks because we gotta speed it up here. Charlotte Hornets are up next. About 40 wins, still out of the playoffs in the 10th spot here. The Hornets, my view is that yes, they kept a lot of their team together, so they should grow as in all that thing, and they gel better, and they retained a lot of their key players in Batum and all that. But at the same time, man, they lost Al Jefferson, who was a big part of that team. Jeremy Lin's gone. And then they acquired Roy Hibbert? Why Roy Hibbert? Is it because Patrick Ewing thinks he's going to transform him? Andrew, your thoughts on the the Hornets' acquisitions of Roy Hibbert, Ramon Sessions, Marco Bellinelli, and Brian Roberts, with key losses being Al Jefferson, Jeremy Lin, Courtney Lee, and some dude named Troy Daniels.
Yeah, Troy Daniels is a big loss for them. You needed someone to play center. Like who else was going to do that? I guess is kind of the question there. I mean, I don't know how much of a role they're going to be asking Roy Hibbert to play. It does seem weird that Roy Hibbert is just out of the NBA essentially, from a meaningful perspective. Like he's obviously still there. He's still getting paid. He just got a new contract, but he doesn't really matter, and that's hard to understand.
No, actually, I think I like the Hornets. I thought last year what really impressed me about the Hornets is just how much Kemba Walker had developed.
Yeah.
Like he used to be a guy who shot a lot but wasn't good with wasn't an accurate jump shooter, but he is an accurate jump shooter now. So he's almost like a light version of Damian Lillard at this point. I don't know. I very much bought into Kemba Walker's development as a real point guard, and if that's the case, then I don't know. It's a decent team. Like they replaced. Like, they lost Courtney Lee, okay, so they replaced him with a shooter like Bellinelli, who is worse, but not significantly worse. Ramon Sessions is literally the same player as Jeremy Lin. Just 2 point guards who drive to the hoop and aren't that great at shooting the three. Oh, they're great at drawing fouls. Roy Hibbert, yeah, okay, his stock has dropped a lot, but Steve Clifford is an incredible defensive head coach. Roy Hibbert is still a massive body. Steve Clifford's going to get a lot out of Roy Hibbert. And it's going to show up their defense, which really did take a hit once they lost Biyombo. And then they retained, Marvin Williams and Nicholas Batum, who are veterans, but they're veterans of a good age, and they know how to play with them last year. I mean, I don't know. And the biggest thing they're getting back is Michael Kidd-Gilchrist, who is just an incredible defender. And so, I mean, I still got him in the playoffs. I got him for 45 wins. A slight step back from last season, but I don't know. I like the Hornets. I think they're going to be a tough team. They're a tough team.
Let's talk about Hornets in the context of another team which I see them kind of fighting with, and that's Washington. I had them just missing the playoffs at number 9. Andrew, thoughts on is it still all up to John Wall there?
I think Charlotte's better than Washington also, but I think what is going on with the John Wall Bradley Beal fallout that is or isn't necessarily happening online right now? Is this a problem? What do you guys think? Because if they've lost everything outside of those two dudes, so if those two dudes can't play together, then they're a dumpster fire.
Will, you're on Twitter a lot. What do you think?
So, I mean, John Wall came out and said, my quotes were taken out of context, but, they were quotes. And what he said was, we have a tendency to hate each other on the court.
Yeah.
And then he said things like, Bradley Beal, now that you got paid that massive contract, you got to be an all-star like I'm an all-star. Who says that, man? Even if you mean that, come on, don't say that to the media. That's never going to, it doesn't sound good. It doesn't sound great. So he's just we like each other off the court. I'm like, that's fantastic. You like each other off the court, but we care about what you do on the court. And
what do we think? What do we think of Bradley Beal as a player at this point? A couple of years ago, when they swept the Raptors, I think
he was incredible.
He was like, can we trade him for DeMar DeRozan? Was a sentiment. Now, a couple of years later, or a year and a half later, has your opinion on Beal changed, Will?
No, I just think he's a guy who just gets injured a lot and hasn't had a lot of great coaching. You're not going to find a guy who is able to defend really well, very athletic, and an incredible shooter. He reminds me a lot of Eric Gordon at this point. And if he just was healthy, which Eric Gordon never was, he could be that kind of player. Eric Gordon with a little better defense, But right now he's Eric Gordon with the same amount of health.
Unless Bradley Beal plays 80 games and continues on a developmental course that we saw and hope for him, I don't know how they're possibly better than they were last year, because I don't see ways that they've otherwise improved. And they were bad last year. They were not a good team, and I don't think that they've done a lot to address that aside from just hoping Bradley Beal is healthy. And I have them, I think they're probably the 9, the 10 spot, somewhere like that. They're I don't have a lot of faith in what this team can be at all. Yeah.
Well, Will's got a lot of faith in Detroit, who he's got at 47 wins. I had Detroit at 44. Andrew didn't fill out his Excel spreadsheet, so we don't know what Andrew thinks of Detroit.
I got him in the playoffs.
They're a good team. What can I say? They're a very good team. They have a lot of talent. And all their players are young and on the upswing of their development curve. Stan Van Gundy is a fantastic head coach. Keeps adding great, useful players. Tobias Harris, they kind of had an adjustment period with Tobias Harris last year. They had a lot of injuries at power forward. Now they have more depth in the front court. And they just have a slew of wings. Like, they can constantly play Stan Van Gundy ball, which is just like a whole bunch of wings who could shoot, who could make plays. And then they have Andre Drummond, who is the most dominant center in the East. And if he takes one more step forward, if it's just like, even if it's just shooting free throws at 60%, at a 60% accuracy, that's a very terrifying team to me. So, I don't know. I mean, I think they probably need to work in Tobias Harris a little bit more as a number 2 option, but otherwise, it's just a very good team, very all primed in the right. Everything's going in the right direction for them, and yeah, I don't know. I like the Pistons, man. They're gonna be a tough out. I don't think the Raptors would lose to the Pistons in the playoffs, but I think the Raptors would probably go 7 games with the Pistons.
How dare you not mention the great Aaron Baines in your assessment of the Pistons? The guy of the San Antonio blood, played in Detroit last year, averaged 6 points a game, shot 76% free throws, 50% shooting. Aaron Baines, guy, he's the ultimate role player at that position. He can go off the pick and roll, can finish with authority. Good finisher on the glass. He's great. Aaron Baines. I'm buying an Aaron Baines shirt.
It's only 6 points, but it's an amazing 6 points.
Well, Boyan's coming for that backup center spot, though. Watch your back, Aaron Baines.
All right, Andrew. Tell me about the Pistons, man. From my view, they have all the right players at the right positions. Like, when you look at their depth chart, everything kind of sort of fits. The big weakness, if you want to call it that, is Andre Drummond's free throw shooting. That hurt them last year a couple times. But the Tobias Harris acquisition I really liked. John Lur's there. KCP's only going to get better. Reggie Jackson, I think, had a pretty good year, and he's going to get better. So they're a team that, if everything goes right, I could totally see them even finishing top 4. But at the same time, if things kind of go south, which is, I guess, for every team, they could be at the edge of the playoffs. But I certainly expect playoffs in the Pistons. Andrew?
Yeah, Stanley Johnson is going to keep getting a lot better. It's everything Will said. This is a team that is well coached. It's the first team we've talked about so far where you look at what they've done this year and the last couple of years, and you can say, oh, I see what they're doing. These decisions make sense. This is a way to build a better team. They're pretty good. They're Andre Drummond just deciding to shoot free throws underhand away from being a very scary team.
Yeah. Let's move on to Miami. Will, 33 wins is what you had for Miami. I'm guessing you're thinking that Chris Bosh will be injured.
Yes, I think Chris Bosh will be injured, and I think Miami has a huge opportunity to just completely blow up. There's the leadership structure that was in Miami for so long has suddenly seemed very, very shaky. Pat Riley has looked pretty bad, especially, that's going to happen if you lose Dwayne Wade over $4 million for a team that wasn't going to be that competitive. Hassan Whiteside, I've always thought that Hassan Whiteside had a solid 15 to 20% chance that he might go full Andrew Bynum if he got money. You know what I mean? Just completely fall out of the league.
That's totally based on his Snapchat, but continue.
Yeah, it's I don't know. It just I don't really see the talent there. Spoelstra's a very, very, very good coach. He'll probably get a lot out of some of their players. They're going to get more minutes, like Josh Richardson and Tyler Johnson. But some of their youth still seems a little bit too far away to contribute immediately. And I don't know. I just see a big falling off for them in terms of, I guess 33 wins is sort of the halfway point between if they completely collapse and bottom out, or if they have a regular season and win 44 games if everything goes smoothly. But I don't think everything's going to go smoothly in Miami. There's a lot of trouble ahead.
So at this time, your backcourt scoring in Miami is basically Goran Dragic, and that's it. Because other guys, you got Winslow, Richardson, Tyler Johnson, James Johnson ends up there. You can't expect any sort of consistent, shot creation from those guys. So that's what Dwayne Wade got you. Is he attracted double teams and he set up players you could play off of him. Goran Dragic is a fantastic player, as we saw in the playoffs last season, but I'm not sure he's the guy you can play off of for 48 minutes. So you need at least 2 of those guys, and right now they basically have 1. And I think Chris Bosh, you're right. it's very optimistic to think that he's going to play 75 games next season. So Miami can go kind of like every season, depending on injury, they can go between 33 and 45 wins. But I think one thing that at least I think is that in the playoffs, they're essentially going to be a bit of a non-factor again. Andrew, finish off Miami.
I think Miami has been finished off. I think they're, they decided to pay Tyler Johnson $51 million, and they did that instead of giving Dwayne Wade $4 million or whatever it was, as you were saying. It's a big step back. They've lost the key veterans that pulled them through that Toronto series to where they got, and they're really relying a lot on a couple young guys who play great defense for them, in Richardson and in the guy Winslow. Thank you. And those are their pieces kind of moving forward. Those are the young guys, but I don't see how either of those guys are going to put the ball in the basket to reach double digits on a regular basis. So, I think they take if Chris Bosh plays, they're like a 7 seed. If Bosh doesn't play, I don't know how they make playoffs.
Yeah, I got them at number 7 too, assuming that Chris Bosh stayed healthy. But as Will said, 33 wins or whatever for them is also not out of the question just because of injury and the lack of backcourt scoring. Let's move on from Miami. Atlanta, the team that this is a team that always seems to be average, and that's what I expect them to be. Lost, obviously, Al Horford again, and they got Dwight Howard. Andrew, let's start with you. What did you make of replacing Al Horford with Dwight Howard? And Jeff Teague is out, and so Schroeder gets the point guard duties there. Evaluate Atlanta's offseason for me. Did they get better or worse?
I think they got worse, and this is the first move they've made in a few seasons that seems to value like a name brand over sort of team culture and team approach to how they play basketball. So if they can get Dwight Howard to completely buy into what they want to do, which is theoretically possible, then they're going to surprise some people, and they're going to be a really tough team to play. But I just don't. I think we have to realize that Dwight is a guy who wants his post-ups now and is not really willing to play that dynamic pick-and-roll game that he was so effective at. So he's still better than people think. People are starting to think that he's kind of a bum. He's not. He's still capable of being a very good player, but the way that he decides he's going to be used really limits his game, and it's going to hurt the way Atlanta plays.
If you look at their point guard position, I love Schroeder, but I think they downgraded there big time. And I think Jeff Teague was a pretty good player for them. He initiated a lot of the offense, created for others. Now it's like Schroeder. I think Jared Jack is there.
That's right, yeah,
Jared Jack's there now.
ACL injury.
Exactly. I don't see Dwight Howard ever being a good team fit. I know, like in the TNT interview this year, he goes, how next season is going to be his defining thing, and he's going to come back and get stronger, and all that talk. I just don't see it happening. I think I've always thought the guy was a bit of a moaner, sulks a lot. I know I'm like totally like maybe I'm mischaracterizing him, but it just from what I've seen so far, I don't expect Dwight Howard to be the guy who rejuvenates his career and turns into a completely different player and not a prima donna in Atlanta. I think as much as Al Horford was like maybe criticized for some of his defense and some of his like late game how he goes away, Dwight Howard, I think in both departments is suspect as well. He on paper he's a good defender. He should be a good defender, but oftentimes in Houston he just wasn't. He was terrible, and that I know James Harden doesn't help there, and maybe he'll be better in Atlanta because of the other guys around him in terms of defensively. But overall, they downgraded on the point guard position, and I'm not a believer in Dwight Howard taking any team to the next level, let alone the Hawks, who lost Horford.
Yeah, I agree. Look, the Hawks very much were built around the best version of Al Horford. Al Horford just characterized their entire team, and Dwight Howard, while very talented in his own right, is a completely different player. And it changes everything that the Hawks need to do with their offense and with their defense. And their supporting cast is kind of old. Like, Kyle Korver is a very important player for them, and now he hasn't been the same since Dellavedova rolled over his ankle. And he's older now. I got him for like 37 wins. Plus, yeah, like you said, they downgraded significantly at point guard. I get getting Taurean Prince because he could turn into DeMar Carroll, but that's not going to happen in the first year of this. And yeah, so I'm out in the Hawks too.
Did they pay Kent Bazemore a lot of money? Yeah, so I guess he's there.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they probably trade Millsap this year too because he's approaching free agency as well.
I was just gonna say they came extremely close to trading him in the summer already. So
trade him to the Raptors.
The Hawks were their offense. They had a lot of fluid offense a couple of years ago. Last year wasn't as great, but they're built around A lot of it is built around Al Horford's face-up game, ability to hit that mid-range jumper, and a bit of his post-up game. And Dwight Howard gives you none of those. So I expect the offense to suffer. Let's move on as we're kind of running a little bit late here. Will's got to go in about 5-6 minutes. So let's move up the chain to the Indiana Pacers, at least for me. 48 wins. I've got them pegged for. Andrew, what do you got them?
I have them finishing fifth. So I think they're better. Paul George is a superstar. They brought in Jeff Teague. They brought in other names that I don't remember. Sorry, this is embarrassing.
Al Jefferson, Thaddeus Young.
Thaddeus Young. Thaddeus Young is who I was thinking of. Yeah, they're outside of Al Jefferson, they're clearly going to play a faster game, and they're going to play a more athletic game, and that's really interesting. And if your whole plan is if you have Al Jefferson buying into playing, 18 minutes a game and just abusing backup centers in the post, then I think that's a really interesting second unit scoring machine. So I think Indiana is really good.
I think you can make a case that their upgrades were just as impressive as Boston's. I really do think that. I know Boston gets I guess we'll get to Al Horford in a bit, but the acquisition of Jeff Teague, they upgraded their point guard. George Hill's a nice player, but Jeff Teague is simply better. Al Jefferson, last year against the Raptors in the playoffs, one of their big problems was bench scoring and bench productivity, and with Al Jefferson and Thad Young, you improve that. So if you had a set of weaknesses outlined for the Pacers last year or in the playoffs, they definitely addressed them. So for me, the offseason grade for them is close to an A. Will?
See, this is where I got to hate on the Pacers, because I don't think that's the case. I think the Pacers' success over the last couple of seasons has been purely founded on their defense. Their offense has been nothing to write home about. Yeah. And in terms of the guys they added on offense, yes, if you look at them individually, these are all upgrades on offense, but they're not. They're going to try to play fast with very little shooting on the court, which is not great. Thaddeus Young is not a shooter. He hasn't really been a shooter in 2-3 years. Jeff Teague is not a reliable shooter, although he can shoot. Obviously, Paul George.
Well, and Solomon Hill was?
In the playoffs, Solomon Hill was.
In the playoffs against the Raptors, because we left them wide open.
Solomon Hill got $50 million in free agency. I can't believe that. No, I mean, look, yes, they have definitely upgraded their offense in terms of just players that are straight up more talented than what they had before, but it still doesn't really quite make sense, because there's just, you want to play fast, but you don't have all that shooting. It's hard to play fast and be effective done that way. But whatever, I think their offense is improved. My point is that their defense is just completely cratered, man. They lost a lot of pieces of their defense. George Hill is a really good defender. We saw the way he defended Kyle Lowry. George Hill is a really good defender. Jeff Teague really isn't. Yama Himne was actually incredible for them on defense. I think we saw that again in the Raptors series as well. Those are really big parts. But the biggest thing is just Frank Vogel. Frank Vogel was able to make defenses out of pretty much anything. And I look at this team in terms of their front court depth. It's Al Jefferson, it's Miles Turner, and it's Kevin Serafin. So who's going to protect the basket for that team? And it's not like the perimeter defenders are that fantastic either. You've got a backcourt now of Monte Ellis and Rodney Stuckey and Jeff Teague. So I don't know, man. But I mean, look, Paul George is the second best player in the Eastern Conference. If he can take his game up even one more level, the Pacers are going to be incredible. Because if you have a superstar like that and players to play off of him, that's going to work.
Indiana it is. Let's move on, because Will's got to go, man. So up next, Boston, I guess, number 3. The top 3 in the East. I had Cleveland, Toronto, and Boston. Will, what'd you have?
Yeah, I mean, I think the top 3 in the East are pretty clear. Are we skipping over the Bulls?
We forgot the Bulls.
Yeah, we forgot the Bulls.
Do you guys have the Bulls in the playoffs?
I mean, I think I have the Bulls. Yeah, I have the Bulls at the 7th seed.
What's so controversial about the Bulls being in the playoffs, Andrew?
I think they're going to be really bad. I don't like this Bulls team at all. I'm out. Hard out.
Jimmy Butler, a revamped Rajon Rondo who led the league in assists. Yeah, Dwayne Wade, who we're crying left Miami and makes Miami weaker, now doesn't make Chicago stronger. Explain that rationale.
I mean, I think that Dwayne Wade doesn't play anywhere close to the... I didn't like what I saw last year as far as trying to build an offense around Jimmy Butler. I love Jimmy Butler, but I don't think that you can really build a great offense around him. And this team was a great defensive team for years, and they're just not that anymore.
Doug McDermott, the Raptor killer. Robin Lopez from New York. Mirotic is getting better. Taj Gibson's there, starting. Bobby Portis.
They got no shooting at all. Yeah. That's the big problem. They have no shooting at all. and then they have 3 players in the backcourt who all have strong personalities and all want the ball in their hands and need the ball in their hands to be moderately effective. That's why the Dwayne Wade going there doesn't really help them, because give him more of the same. And Rajon Rondo, I mean, oh man, Rondo sucks, guys. I don't know what to say. Rondo is just a bad player at this point. Like, he's just not, his skills are not effective towards a team being successful. He racks up a lot of assists, sure. That's because he has the ball in his hands all the time. Look at the offenses he runs; they're terrible.
Yeah, he's a good player on a bad team last year in Sacramento, and I don't think that assist number will translate over to Chicago just because he's not going to get the ball in his hand so much with Dwayne Wade there. I think you pointed that out already, but at the same time, I can see them getting the 6th spot in the East fairly easily, just because there's a big drop-off in the East after Cleveland, Toronto, and Boston. So after that, it's pretty much wide open for teams like Chicago, who have the talent but may not have the chemistry and so on.
I mean, they're classic like veterans team, and like everybody's a veteran, they know how to play, and that's kind of important. If you've got someone like for example, I think Milwaukee has more talent that fits better, but I think Chicago has like just more dudes who quote unquote know how to win, and a lot of that just comes down to veteranship. Like, yeah, I don't know. I think the Bulls will make a way to get in the playoffs. Anyway, I'm gonna leave the podcast here. You guys talk about the top 3. I hope you all have the Raptors over the Celtics. That overrated.
Yes,
franchise.
Of course we do. Let's. Okay, Will, thanks for coming, man. We'll talk soon.
See you guys.
Andrew,
See you, Andrew,
you're held hostage still. So let's talk about the Celtics, man. A lot was made about them acquiring Horford, and I feel that every media outlet, maybe inspired by Bill Simmons' love for them and so on, essentially has overrated what the Celtics have done. Yeah, they got Al Horford, they got Jaylen Brown through the draft. They lost a key piece in Jared Sullinger. They were already a pretty good team last year, but do they, like, if you had to talk about threats to Cleveland, would it be Boston or Toronto, which is the bigger threat?
I think you can make an argument either way. I think that neither team is really a real threat to Cleveland as long as LeBron is playing. But I think that Jay Crowder, like, he can kind of guard LeBron in the same way that DeMar Carroll can kind of guard LeBron. Al Horford is a really, really good player, and I think that by the end of the season, the defense in Boston is going to be really, really difficult to score on. I think that's one thing that they're definitely going to have going for them. They're not going to be as good of an offensive team as Toronto is, I don't think. But Toronto and Boston by the end of the year, unless Toronto can pull a trade, and by the way, Boston still has a big trade that they could possibly make as well. Those two teams are going to be really close to each other as far as overall competitiveness goes. But ultimately, we want to say who has a better chance of beating Cleveland. I don't think it matters. I still don't think either one of these teams is close to being able to beat Cleveland in a 7-game series.
I think that's no. I don't think so. I think neither team improved. We're talking about Toronto and Boston at the same time, kind of. I don't think neither team improved to the point where Cleveland is going to feel threatened at all. I think the trade that didn't happen, that people were kind of waiting for, was the Westbrook to maybe in the East. That would perhaps add a challenger in the East to Cleveland, but that didn't happen, and it doesn't look like it's going to happen. That was essentially the move that might have threatened Cleveland. And at this point, yeah, it's cute that Boston ordered Al Horford and we added Jared Sullinger to replace Bismack Biyombo, but ultimately, neither of these two kind of moves the needle against the Cavs. From an injury front, what do you think of Amir Johnson? Basically, is their starting center at this point?
Yeah, kind of. Unless you want to call Kelly Olynyk a center, they've got 7 power forwards on the roster and no centers, really, no true centers. So, look, you're not going to get me to say anything bad about Amir Johnson. If a healthy Amir Johnson is on your team, then he's going to give you 20 minutes of really solid defense. But do you think they're going to play Al Horford at center? Is that probably what they're going to do? Like, slide Jay Crowder down to power forward? Their crunch time unit is probably Horford at the 5, Jay Crowder at the 4, I would think.
Exactly. I think it's these positions are sometimes they kind of hamstring you into picking lineups. But yeah, their crunch time lineup would have Al Horford, and maybe if Amir Johnson has played, depends what the opposition is doing. But Amir Johnson's not a bad guy to have there defensively if you want to play offense, defense. Jay Crowder obviously stays there. Isaiah Thomas stays there. Avery Bradley stays there. And then it's a question of, is it Amir Johnson, or is it, if you want to go really small, Marcus Smart is available to you if you want to go small. So they have options in their lineup which they can use in crunch time units or to counter matchups, much like the Raptors did last year, essentially when they took out Jonas and Bismack sometimes and put in Patrick Patterson at the 5 or something like that. They can do that as well. So they're fluid in that sense. They have the talent now. But let's talk about this. In a 7-game series, assuming Boston has matured to the point, played 82 games, and they've gelled together, and the Raptors, it's a complete hypothetical. But who would you give a better chance to?
I can't say that it's not a bias thing, but I do like the Raptors still in that series, I think. I think part of that is that we haven't seen what the Al Horford Celtics look like. So, defensively, with how well this team is coached and with the players that they have and Al Horford coming in, this is a team that is going to be really, really difficult to score on when they're locked in. Like astronomically hard to play against defensively in a 7-game series. I still like the Raptors in that series. I think that they can push Boston in ways that Boston probably can't push or score on the Raptors, but
I think much like last year, home court advantage is going to be big in the playoffs this season. I think the Raptors won 2 Game 7s last year because of their home court, and I think the same is going to be true this year. When I ask myself that question, Boston-Toronto, I'm like, depends on who has home court. I think they're that close that it really matters where Game 7 is played. I can see the Celtics beating us a couple times this season. I can see the Raptors beating them. So it's a pretty much a write-off in terms of competitiveness. But I just feel that the Raptors, they have 2 guys in Lowry and DeRozan, Lowry who's already proven, and DeRozan who might get a little better this year. And I think the Sullinger signing is a bit under the radar for the Raptors, because I saw some, we talk about the getting stronger and putting on 10 pounds in the off season. He's gotten stronger, and he looks much leaner, and he looks ready to compete. And I think that we're gonna miss Bismack Biyombo's defense at the rim, but I think Jared Sullinger is somebody who might end up surprising us with some of his rebounding and offense.
Yeah, I think Sullinger is a big upgrade over Scola. I think if you just look at it in that sense alone, then that was an improvement at the power forward position. Bismack's defense is sorely going to be missed. I think that's definitely going to be a thing. And I think that you're going to see a second unit that looks a little bit different, like the way that they play. So I'm not sure how the Raptors are going to do that yet, but I do think that they will play differently without Biyombo in there. And I think Valanciunas is going to play bigger minutes for them. He's going to play a bigger role. The Raptors are going to look a little bit, not entirely different, but they are going to look different in the ways that they play their second unit, I think. And Boston's second unit scoring was Evan Turner just doing his thing, and that is not going to be a factor for them. So I think Boston has gotten a lot better in every way except for second unit scoring. That's one thing I think they need to be concerned about.
Yeah. And for the Raptors, I think they have a bit of a hole to fill. And the question is who the 4th big is right now. I think JV, Patrick Patterson, and Sullinger kind of take up the first 3 spots. But who the backup center is right now remains to be seen. So there's some talk of DeMario Carroll slipping over, and maybe Jared Sullinger plays the 5 with Carroll at the 4. But essentially, one of Poeltl, Bebe Nogueira, and Pascal Siakam have to sort of step up. And right now, if you ask, and I've asked a bunch of people on who they count on to step up, it's an evenly spread answer where you don't really know which of these 3 guys is ready to contribute at an NBA level. I think last podcast I talked about Pascal Siakam being the guy that might have, just because he's a garbage man type player, he might be most suited to produce. But that's the question, right? Pascal Siakam, Jakob Poeltl, Lucas Nogueira. We need one of these guys to be at least a consistent contributor.
And I think it's important to remember too that whoever's playing that role at the start of the season that doesn't matter. You can make a trade, but I think that come time the playoffs roll around, the Raptors are probably either hoping that they've found someone else to play that spot, or that Jakob Poeltl can play at least 15 to 20 minutes a game in a meaningful role in the second unit. That's the hope.
And as we look ahead to training camp starting in October, I think there's always a couple of key questions heading into training camp, and I think that's the main one for the Raptors, is that the rest of the rotation is kind of sorted out. It's just which of these 3 guys will distinguish themselves to get some minutes. And I guess that's going to be the focus of the next couple of podcasts as we come close to training camp. But the Raptors aren't no major questions here, assuming DeMario Carroll stays healthy. He's basically going to be like a new signing to them for the regular season at least. So I'm with you. I'll pick the Raptors ahead of the Celtics on account of experience and just having some better talent in key positions. And as we round off the podcast by talking about the Cavaliers, the question is, do we really need to talk about the Cavaliers?
I don't think so. They just won the championship. They've still got that guy that plays with the number 23 or number 8 or whatever he plays. They still have LeBron James. I'm still not awake. This is evident.
Yeah, it's Mike Dunleavy. I mean, of all the free agents that went back and forth, that was a pretty neat pickup for them because, good shooter, veteran presence, good ball handler, moves well off the ball. He just adds a lot of intelligence to that team. And yeah, they lost Deladova, who's a good defender, and gave them a boost off the bench. But Dunleavy, I thought, was a very sound pickup.
Yeah, they didn't lose anybody who, J.R. Smith still hasn't signed yet, I don't think, so keep an eye out for that. But outside of J.R. Smith, they brought back everyone who played real meaningful minutes for them in their finals wins. Like, as that series carried along and they started winning games against the Warriors, that kind of went along with Dellavedova losing the spot in the rotation. So they've got all the same players coming back. They re-signed James Jones. I don't know how or why, but James Jones continues to be the winningest player in history. So
he's like Robert Horry without the game-winning shots.
Yeah, he's if Robert Horry never got subbed in.
Yeah, and I think there's a contract there's a clause in LeBron's contract which says if you sign him, you got to sign James Jones. So I think that explains that as well.
Guy just has great jokes in the plane or something.
Yeah, Timothy Mozgov obviously was the other major exit, but he's not really major because he didn't really play in the playoffs as much, especially against. So I think that sums it up here, man. The Raptors ahead of the Celtics. I think no arguments from us three at least. The Cavaliers stay top, and I just feel to round this off, it's like once you have Cleveland, Boston, Toronto, or Cleveland, Toronto, Boston, however you want it. After that, the field really opens up with the likes of Atlanta, Chicago, Miami. Just that's so injury dependent that they could go up and down. The East, after those three spots, I find, Andrew, is pretty much wide open.
Pretty much, yeah. I think the three of us have disagreed a little bit on who is finishing between 4 and 10. Like there seems to be a fair bit of back and forth on who's going to fit in those spots, but I think the 4 to 10 spots we all kind of have the same 6 teams, 7 teams. It's just where they're going to fit, and it's wide open.
I think we'll continue with a preview talk next week and for the next few podcasts as training camp rolls around, starting in October. Until then, Andrew, thanks for waking up early, getting your coffee, and hopping on the podcast. Hopefully, you're fully woken up by now.
I'm going back to bed, sir. I work nights, so that's why I'm so out of it right now.
That's that. And listener, thank you for tuning in. Do support Raptors Republic at patreon.com/Raptors Republic. Rate us on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and all that stuff. I'll have a couple of more podcasts before I sign off for 1 full year, Andrew. 1 full year. Whoa. I'm off from. Yeah, I'm done, man. I'm done for a year.
I didn't know this.
Yes. Blake or Will probably host the Raptors Weekly podcast starting in late September/October. So a couple of more with me, and after that you get a new host, a better host, maybe a better jingle as well with the podcast. But until then, we'll see you next week, listener, when we talk about more East preview stuff and a lot more Raptor talk. Talk soon. Bye.